less than 2 p.m. in Washington, where our nation's capital is bracing for what could be the most pivotal test of the separation of powers. Today is day 50 of the impeachment inquiry, and here's what's happening. Tomorrow, public hearings begin, and for the first time, the American people will begin to hear publicly what lawmakers have been told in private, that there was a quid pro quo, Ukraine knew about it, Rudy Giuliani was the point person, and he was acting on orders from the president. Now, with just 24 hours to go, the president's defenders are lining up their strategies. On Capitol Hill, Republicans are trying to sidestep witness testimony and focus on the July 25th phone call between Presidents Trump and Zelensky. In an 18-page memo circulated to Republican committee members last night, lawmakers are being urged to argue that the July 25th call summary shows no evidence of pressure, that President Zelensky and President Trump have both said there was no pressure on the call, that the Ukrainian government was not aware of a hold on U.S. security assistance at the time of the July 25th call, and that ultimately the president did meet with Zelensky and the U.S. security assistance was released to Ukraine in September 2019. We're going to have a fact check on all those points in just a moment. First, though, while Hill Republicans are coordinating, the White House seems to be clashing. New reporting from the Washington Post claims infighting is undermining the White House's response to the inquiry. According to the Post, Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney blames White House attorney Pat Cipollone for not doing more to stop government officials from testifying. And while Cipollone has accused Mulvaney of, quote, essentially confirming Democrats' accusations in front of television cameras and reporters during that October 17th press conference, heading into tomorrow's hearing, you have to wonder, though, if the White House is prepared for the fight. Joining us now, MSNBC correspondent Garrett Haake, PBS NewsHour White House correspondent and MSNBC political analyst Yamiche Alcindor, Politico senior Washington correspondent Anna Palmer, and former White House senior director and former State Department senior advisor Nayyera Haq. Everyone, welcome. Garrett, I do want to start with you. House Republicans seem to be lining up their story, and they're focused on the July 25th call. Why are they moving towards only going there, limiting their scope, and ignoring what many of the witnesses have said over and over again?
That's where the facts line up best for them, or at least that's what they think. The two witnesses who will be appearing on Wednesday were not privy to that phone call in real time. They did not have direct connection with the president, and the Republican strategy appears to be evolving in that way. If you cannot or you choose not to try to undercut the witnesses in their entirety, at least wall them off from the president of the United States. And I think that's what we can expect to see from Republicans this week. They will try to separate what from these witnesses are things that the witnesses simply believed or were their opinion, what were they told second or third hand, and what did they witness themselves. With the stakes this high, with impeachment, essentially the political death penalty at stake for Donald Trump, that can make the difference potentially, they believe, with undecided lawmakers and with the public at large. Yes, perhaps the concerns of these diplomats might be unnerving to some, but if they're not exactly tied to the president's specific behavior or can't be tied directly to what they witnessed firsthand, that might be enough.
So, Anna, in trying to focus just on the July 25th call, Republicans are ignoring much of what the witnesses have told Congress, but they're also ignoring some of the language in that presidential summary of the call between Zelensky and Donald Trump. They say there's no conditionality or evidence of pressure. The president says, do us a favor, though, before talking about the 2016 election and talking about Joe Biden. Zelensky has said he didn't feel any pressure, but he said that while he was standing next to Donald Trump at the UN as they were meeting. And the money, Anna, the money that was released by the Pentagon and by the White House for Ukraine, that came right after there were accounts from the whistleblower that were made public. So I guess help us understand what the witnesses have been telling us as well, and why the Republicans want to choose to ignore that.
Right. I mean, clearly what we're going to hear on Wednesday and then Friday when you have the former ambassador to Ukraine testify, as well is this concept of this pressure campaign that they felt internally behind the scenes. And then Maria Yovanovitch, the former ambassador, is going to talk about how basically Rudy Giuliani and others were involved in a smear campaign against her. Clearly, what Republicans are trying to do is defend the president as best as possible. They haven't found a good way to poke holes in the testimony behind the scenes in these depositions. And so I think they're trying to, kind of skirt around that as much as possible and just focus on what the president exactly did as they try to defend him.
So the congressional Republicans, Yamiche, they have a plan at least. They're going to focus on this call. They've got an 18-page memo with all of their talking points. What is the White House's plan? Because the Washington Post is reporting that there's a lot of infighting between the Chief of Staff, acting Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, and White House lawyer Pat Cipollone.
Well, essentially, the White House is really looking for the president to lead in their direction what they should be doing. The president is going to be tomorrow hosting the president of Turkey, but everyone understands that the president's going to be laser focused on monitoring this public hearing in this impeachment inquiry tomorrow. And he's going to be looking for Republicans to display this fierce loyalty that he wants so badly, which is why we saw this 18-page memo. Now, Republicans are essentially going to be focusing on the fact that they think the president's state of mind is the most important part here. And they're going to basically be trying to talk about intangible things like, well, what was the president really trying to do? Is there motive there on the part of the president? I've been talking to a lot of Democratic aides. They say they learned a lot of lessons from the hearing with Robert Mueller, and they want people to really understand that they want to have blockbuster witnesses, I'm told, from bookend to bookend. And that's why they're starting with William Taylor, because they think he can tell the story all by himself of this pressure campaign that Democrats believe President Trump put on Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden. And they also want Democrats to have a lot of time, the 45 minutes they're going to have between Adam Schiff and lawyers to be able to question and make statements before Republicans can speak. And that's going to be happening because they think that people are going to make their minds up within the first hour and a half of this hearing. As a result, they're trying to capture that and tell their narrative early.
So, Nayyera, Laura Cooper, who is a Pentagon official, testified yesterday. She's basically in charge of overseeing the money that was going to go to Ukraine, that ultimately did go to Ukraine. And she testified that it was really important that the U.S. stay behind Ukraine. The U.S. continue to back Ukraine as a strategic partner. Why was it so important for the U.S. to maintain its support of Ukraine?
This all ties back to Russia. I mean, Speaker Pelosi said it right. All roads lead to Russia, particularly when it comes to Donald Trump. 2015, Russia rolled in and just took over a piece of the Ukraine in Crimea, leading to an international crisis at the UN. Russia was kicked out of the G7, and Congress guaranteed that they would provide military aid. So this is not just the policy of this current administration. This is longstanding U.S. national security policy.
Bipartisan policy.
Exactly. And so to try to use military aid, again, authorized by Congress, cleared by the Defense Department, all of the experts agreed this was necessary. It really shows that Trump is using national security for his own personal agenda.
Yamiche, why does it always go back to Russia?
I think there are the critics of the president who think that this is someone who either, one, has a nefarious relationship with Russia, maybe with financial ties, or there are people who also think the president has said over and over again that he likes strong men, that he thinks that there are people around the world who are leading their country in a strong way, and Russia is one of those people. He said that he gets along very well with Vladimir Putin. The issue, of course, is that infighting that you talked about between Mulvaney and the White House counsel, but also that happens between officials in the White House like John Bolton and others who have real different ideas of how close U.S. foreign policy should be from Russia. There were people within the White House that were talking about this idea that the president was making it harder to have a good relationship with Ukraine, and in fact was actually playing into the hands of Russia when it came to pushing for this investigation into Joe Biden.
Let's talk about how the polling is going so far at impeachment. And Anna, CBS has new polling out. It's a bit of a mixed bag for both Republicans and Democrats. We're going to put it up on the screen. When it comes to how Democrats are handling the impeachment inquiry, 48% of the American public say they've done a good job. 52% say they've done a bad job. How President Trump is handling it, 43% good job, 56% bad job. Does the president deserve to be impeached over Ukraine? Now it's 43%. In October, it was 42%, so it's only slightly gone up, still within the margin of error. Have you made up your mind on impeachment? Yes, 73% of those who have expressed an opinion on impeachment say that they have made up their mind. And the impeachment inquiry by party, when you ask this question, is a political distraction. A majority of Republicans, big majority of Republicans, call it a political distraction and a critical matter. A majority of Democrats see it as a critical matter. So this is dividing down partisan lines. Are Republicans looking at this and thinking, OK, we're doing the right thing? Are Democrats looking at this and thinking something else? What can you tell us?
I mean, I think clearly it just shows how divided this country is and how kind of Donald Trump is very divisive in general. One of those numbers that really stuck out to me, though, is the concept of is this process fair? Is it impartial? One of the first numbers you pulled up there, where I do think Republicans' talking points saying that this is behind closed doors, that this is, whether this process is fair or not, is something that has certainly, kind of made its way into the ether. And the question is going to be for Democrats in the next week or so, when it becomes public, does the American public see, okay, this was a fair process? Okay, now do we believe, is there any change in the numbers on whether or not they support impeachment?
What are you going to be looking out for?
Well, I think when we're looking at and what most people should be looking at is the public policy and diplomacy play of this. The Republicans are looking to convince the Senate and the members of the Senate and just give them some reason why they can still support Donald Trump, whereas the Democrats are looking to build a simple narrative for the broader American public that will effectively galvanize voters in swing states and heading into 2020. So whether or not Trump actually gets removed from office may not be the conclusion of this impeachment inquiry.
And just for our viewers, so you know how this is going to go tomorrow, the impeachment inquiry is going to be held in the House Intelligence Committee. Adam Schiff is going to be the chairman. He's going to be the one presiding over the proceedings. He's going to take 90 minutes to himself. The minority leader in that committee, the Republican minority leader, will take 90 minutes to himself if he wants it. They do not have to pass it on to lawmakers. They can always pass it on to their counsel, the majority counsel or the minority counsel. If you're watching tomorrow and you recognize the majority counsel, that's because he used to be a legal analyst for MSNBC. Daniel Goldman is the majority counsel for Adam Schiff. So tomorrow, impeachment proceedings publicly begin. Hold on to your hats. Garrett Haig, Yamiche Alcindor, Anna Palmer, and Nayyera Haq. Guys, thank you very much. And once again, special coverage starts at 9 a.m. Eastern.